An Emily Dickinson poem about loss and sorrow? You don't say. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one being the poetry discussion playlist, and number two being the Emily Dickinson poetry discussion playlist, a playlist dedicated exclusively to the greatest poet of all time, Emily Dickinson, and you can argue that if you want, but you are welcome to be wrong. The poem in question today, After 100 Years, and it reads as such. After 100 years, nobody knows the place. Agony, that enacted there, motionless as peace. Weeds, triumphant, ranged, strangers strolled and spelled at the lone orthography of the elder dead. Winds of summer fields recollect the way. Instinct picking up the key dropped by memory. This poem is about some tragedy that happened someplace, and no one remembers the thing. No one remembers the death. No one remembers the carnage. No one remembers those terrible things that happened in this place, except for possibly what are supposedly, if you read scholarship on this poem, tombstones. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that weeds are growing over the tombstones, the lone orthography being the words on the tombstones themselves. So at this time, especially, tombstones with writing on them would have been an expensive thing. You would have been looking at something. So oftentimes, just to make the point, the graves of children so not a great percentage of children born survived. And oftentimes they were buried in graves with unmarked tombstones because of this. Because the tombstones themselves, children would have survived at birth about 50% of the time. So it would have been a crippling sort of financial burden if you had 2-3 children that didn't make it, and all of a sudden you're paying for these tombstones. So I'm not positive that these are tombstones. I think this may be scars on the earth. I think that this may be simply the remains of the deceased. We have to remember that at this time, there were no videos and few photographs. So I think that what's really being commented on here is the fact that human nature is fleeting, ephemeral. We are here today, we are not forever. And without this sort of orthography of our lives, without this sort of biography, how many people died and are forgotten? How many people do we remember from just 3 generations past? This is something that Alex Hormozy talks about all the time. One of the things that can hold you back in this life is this fear of what others will think. But what does that matter? 50 years from now, no one will know your name, let alone the people who hated on you. No one will know your name. It is unlikely that many people will know your name, even if you accomplish something in this life. So this fear of being judged just holds people back. This poem is a reminder of that, the reminder of the fleeting nature of our existence, that we have to act today in order to make the world what we want, to live in the world that we want. This poem, I think, however, one of the more compelling ways to think about it is to, despite the fact that this is one of the Emily Dickinson poems that kind of exists completely on the page, at least if you're willing to accept a lot of the scholarship about it. But I think that one of the more interesting ways to talk about this poem is by bringing in something that is extracurricular to the page itself, outside of the poem. It is true that our existence is fleeting. Maybe it's true that this is one of Emily Dickinson's more straightforward poems, more obvious poems. I'm not 100% positive. If we are to look a little bit deeper here, this is about being forgotten. This is about the earth reassuming those parts of us. But a poem is meant to be read on levels. So if we take something outside of this poem, if we are able to infuse something to this poem, instead of a terrible occurrence such as a death that is leaving its mark upon the ground, what if we take this poem and place it onto the body? What if the commentary that we're making here is a trauma to the individual that is forgotten? Right? You have scars on your body. If you've gone through physical trauma like that, you have scars psychologically from things that have gone wrong in your life, that have made you into the way that you are. What if the greater commentary here is not that the world will move on in your absence? What if the commentary to be had here is that we have to move on ourselves? These things that leave scars upon our body, these things that damage us psychologically, we have to get past that. We have to move on because the world will. I think that maybe there is some dual nature to be had from this poem, that it is commenting that we are too quickly forgotten. No matter what the thing is, the agony enacted upon the individual that leaves them motionless and at peace, maybe. Sure, that will be forgotten. Other people will pass over. The world will be renewed in generations. But so too should our own lives be treated in this fashion. If the world will move on from the greatest tragedy of your life, that being your death, why shouldn't you, in your only chance at life, move past those things which harm you? It is only if we do that thing, moving past those tragedies, moving past those things that burden us, it is only then that we can fully live our lives. And if we do not fully live our lives, what are the chances that we will be remembered when we are gone? Ironically, this comes to us from Emily Dickinson, who maybe, it could be said, did not live the fullest life, but 1,775 poems by the author would suggest otherwise. It would suggest that Emily Dickinson herself lived multiple lives within that one fraction of a time on Earth. Here we are, all these years later, still talking about Emily Dickinson. So what does it mean to you to live that full life? Emily Dickinson, reserved away from the world at large, lived lifetimes through her pen, through the things that she wrote, through that orthography of Emily Dickinson. Do you know what that would be for you? How is it that you want to live? What would be the best life that you could put forward so that after 100 years, you have made your mark upon the earth, whether those summer fields recollect the way? Diving into Emily Dickinson in this way, being willing to put our own life through her words, I think she forces us into introspection, into contemplation of our place, contemplation of our lives, contemplation of those things we wish to do on a daily basis. I mean, think about volumes of poetry that Emily Dickinson wrote, and I have not read one. What I have not. Surely I have read some through first times that I couldn't do anything with. But all of these words have a meaning behind them. And being able to claw our way through those weeds triumphant ranged, the words that we cannot connect with our lives and find some rooting for them. You know, I think that there's so much in the world that you could read, right? There's so many movies you could watch, shows you could watch, websites you could read, all of these things. Emily Dickinson has never failed me. And here we are again. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos a week, poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.